This video explores primitive reflexes and how they impact our lives. I'm talking with Wendy Nelson, founder of senseenabled.com. In episode 1, learn about the broad-ranging implications for young people, and in episode 2 of this two-part series, learn about the long-term impacts in adults. We are back with Wendy Nelson. Thank you so much for joining us for this second part episode. We're talking about sensory processing, primitive reflexes, some of the founders of where this work comes from. Right. Some other big ideas from first episode were, what else? Anything else from the first episode that we should do? Like, if you want to know more about this, go check the first episode and then come back to us here on the second one.
If you have questions about primary reflexes, you can take a look at my website, senseenabled.com. Mm-hmm. You can go to Janet Oliver, planforlearninginlife.com. And
Learning and Living or Learning and Life?
I'm sorry, Learning and Living.
Planforlearninganдлiving.com. Okay.
And both of those places have information more about the reflexes and the sensory processing.
Cool.
So.
And in the first episode, we talk about sensory processing and reflexes and how those show up for kids and
adults
to a small extent, which I'd like to talk more about over the next half hour or so, which is what the time we have for today.
Right.
So sensory processing and reflexes in adults and the systems that are part of that.
Right. Well, you have little people that grow up into adults,
right? And
they take these things with them.
Sure.
Whether it's the reflexes or the sensory processing issues, you don't outgrow this. It's not like, oh well, if I just grit my teeth and grow enough, it'll stop. That's not the way it works.
If I just fight through, so the 2 o'clock slow down, I fight through this, it'll be 5 o'clock and I'll get to go home and relax. This isn't like that.
No. Yeah. An example of that is I know someone who has issues with anxiety.
Mm-hmm. There's 100 million people in this country who have issues
with anxiety. and his take on it was, if he just doubled down and told himself, he yelled at these things loud enough with his upper brain, mm-hmm. and tried to control it with his upper brain, that it was going to make a difference.
Much work.
And could not really, when we talked about this, could not process the idea that some of his anxiety was driven by a reflex in his body, that no matter how much therapy he had, talk therapy he had, mm-hmm. no matter how much medication he could take, no matter how much yelling he did or meditation, his body was still going to react this way because it was his reflex that was making him behave this way in certain, loud noise, jump out of the chair, right? That's his body, that's his reflex. And so until the reflex is addressed, doesn't matter. All this stuff over here is not going to it will do some things for you, but until you address that root cause of the reflex, mm-hmm. you're still going to have these reactions, mm-hmm. because it's the reflex. So with the reflex work, there are things that ATNR, which is when you're...
So ATNR, so in the first episode I asked you how many reflexes are there. You said there's about 8.
8
and then there's a few other reflexes that have to do with face and hands. So ATNR is one of the 8 primary reflexes.
8 primary reflexes.
Okay, cool.
And
what does ATNR stand for?
So, anatomic neck reflex.
Oh, nice word.
And when when you see the fetus in that curl in the womb, right? They're all curled up.
Yeah.
What happens is you come out and that stays. So you have one side of the body that is contracted and the other side of the body is extended.
Okay.
So you'll see it in people who have one shoulder is higher than the other.
Okay.
Their hips are higher because this one side is contracted, right? So this side's pulling back into that curl. This side's extended. So you have the person who their bra or their shoulder strap, the purse always falls
Sure.
off of this shoulder. You have someone who always has lower back pain because one hip is higher or lower than the other. If you put them down on the floor,
Probably should just fuse their joints together.
if you put them down on the floor, you will actually see where one heel is longer than the other. There are people that they go to the tailor and they say, okay, my leg is longer.
Yeah.
And they have to have one measurement for one leg and one for the other. This is part of that. And you'll see it in the face. So if you look at Jeff Bezos or Harvey Weinstein, you look at their pictures,
and the hemispheres
and they
of
have,
their face
and
are off.
you see where the one eye is open wide and the other one looks like a little slit. This is the AT&R pulling in the face. So when people say they've got a better side for a photograph,
right,
that's part of it. And people will have back issues and they have problems with this.
So this doesn't just affect people of specific economic status. This affects billionaires too.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this
There's
is
no
human. This is fundamental to the organism.
Everybody has some of this. AT&R is a very, very common and also very persistent reflex. So this is one of those ones that I have personally. It affected my pregnancy and my labor because of the tilt of the pelvis. The fetus was my daughter specifically had her head down and she got stuck in this. So when they get stuck like that, they can only move so far, so many ways. And so she gets the cord wrapped around her neck. Well, then she can't get down the birth canal without strangling herself. So you have people who their labor doesn't advance because the baby can only come down so far. And then you end up having a C-section.
Okay, so...
Which, the impact of that on a life, right?
Well, so
right.
I didn't know anything about... So I was a C-section baby.
Right.
Also.
Not everybody is a C-section because of AT&R.
Right.
But quite frequently there are problems with labor because of AT&R.
Interesting. A primary theme of this conversation series is about personal agency.
Right.
So we've talked in the first episode about primitive reflexes. One of the goals in this episode is to talk about sensory processing and maybe get into the vestibular, but also you just mentioned birth trauma, which is a huge deal that no one talks about.
And we could there are a couple other things that we could talk about that's going to put that sensory processing conversation out, but are things, reflexes that impact labor and pregnancy and birth.
And how does that affect... So again, the overarching theme as far as I'm concerned is about personal agency. Survivors to thrivers. How do I get from places of stuckness and frozenness and fight or flight, involuntary domination of my capacity to live my life, to a place of I'm in charge, a place of agency.
Right.
And I guess this is a fairly high level but specific question. Personal agency... birth trauma, how does birth trauma impact personal agency? And then if it's not addressed and dealt with according to some of these protocols and some of these people that you've learned from and the various tools and stuff that we've talked about in this episode and the previous episode, what happens to an adult who had birth trauma that they don't even know about because they don't remember being born?
Right.
Birth trauma.
Okay. So you live with it. It is part.
That's just who I am.
We're back to that's who I am. That's me. You don't know, so you just assume that these things are part of your makeup, part of who you are. The compensations that we've talked about that you do are part of who you are.
Sure.
So you go into a room and you have to touch everything, right? To orient yourself.
Part of grounding
for yourself
is touching everything and like feeling things and checking stuff out.
Now this is getting more into the sensory work.
Work.
And
which is kind of what we wanted to do in the second episode. Right. So perfect.
So we can make that transition here. So you have what's called proprioception. It's
Okay.
where you are in space, where
Mhm.
you are in gravity.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's huge. And the underlying piece of that is the vestibular system, which leads us back to the ear. Because
Yeah.
that's little system inside the inner ear.
Right.
And it's, if you think of it like your internal gyroscope, it informs you where you are in gravity. It has 3 axes, so you have up to down, you have side to side, and you have side to side.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what tells you where you are. For people who have poor proprioception,
Say that 3 times fast.
poor proprioception, poor proprioception, poor proprioception. Yeah, it breaks down real quick. They have different ways of compensating, right? So they will come in and they will walk around. The people that you see, and they're always touching something. They walk into a room and they're touching everything because they're trying to orient themselves.
Right.
For some people that are really seriously impacted, they put their arms on the table and they can't tell you where their arms begin and the table starts.
Right.
It's the kids that have a zillion stuffies on the bed and are sleeping under 4 comforters in the middle of the summer because they want that weight. Because they lay down in the bed and they diffuse. They don't know where they're at. They can't tell where the edges are.
Wow.
So all those stuffies, all that weight, that orients them. That tells them where they're at. I have an edge. Bear's here, I'm here.
Right.
They like to wear tight clothes because if I've got nice tight sleeve, that tells me where I'm at.
Right.
So the proprioception piece is part of that gravity sense.
Okay.
And that is underlined by the vestibular.
Okay.
So these are one of the systems. These are the systems that Judith Bluestone she's got what she calls a spaghetti chart.
Okay.
And the spaghetti chart goes from kind of the foundational systems that are really the first ones in and underpin everything else up to the ones that are higher functioning. So you go from olfaction, which is the sense of smell. It's
Sure.
one of the first systems that come in, and it's one of the last systems to go.
What do you mean last systems to go?
So
Last systems to
leave us when we die, we'll still have a sense of smell. It's in the limbic part of the brain.
Okay.
And it ties everything. It's why when you smell a certain perfume or something cooking, and it has an emotional piece to it, because it's in the limbic part of the brain.
Yeah.
So the emotion and the sense of smell get tied together.
Is that, I'm thinking of pheromones.
Yeah, I'm not, maybe. I'm not so sure about pheromones.
So like Axe body spray and all that other stuff that they sell, they say it's pheromones.
So if you say Axe,
whatever it is.
the aftershave.
Yeah.
And I remember a bad date from somebody who wore too much of it. That's the limbic system at work, right? Because that smell is married to that memory.
Emotion.
And it puts it in. And it's one of the first senses to develop, and it's one of the last to leave us as we leave this world.
Wow.
So, and it's why smells can trigger really important emotional reactions for people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of those initial systems. And then you go up to a couple up, and then you're at the vestibular system. So
what do you mean a couple up?
Well, I'd have to look at the chart. I don't have it totally memorized. But you've got olfaction, tactility,
okay,
and which is the sense of touch, textures.
Okay.
And then you have vestibular.
And these systems build on top of each other
These
what
are
way?
foundational pieces.
Okay.
So the vestibular
of a developing human being?
Of sensory issues, of being able to process information.
Mm-hmm.
So the vestibular system is that sense of gravity, all right? We were talking about how it's that internal gyroscope where you are in space.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about what it would be like when you get really, really dizzy and you want to throw up, your eyes are messed up, you can't hear, you're buzzing, you can't focus on hearing, your stomach is going. It's a very big response.
Yeah, it seems
so if your vestibular system is challenged, then everything else above that gets harder. It impacts your sense of gravity, your proprioception. It impacts low muscle tone. So, and the low muscle tone then impacts your ability to visually track, which is
because the eyes have muscles.
Well, it has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with you can have 20/20 vision and still have visual problems because your eyes aren't working smoothly together.
That's exactly why I wear glasses.
Right. So you have one eye that goes here, and then the next eye follows. Judith had a young lady who was a teenager and had problems reading. Extremely intelligent, but she could not read. And went in for an assessment, and during the assessment they found that her eyes weren't tracking smoothly together. So for her, when she was trying to read, all the letters were walking off the page like little ants. Right? And her mother said, "Why didn't you say something?" And her response was, "I thought this is the way everybody was doing it. She figured everybody else had figured out how to stop the ants or to catch up with them, but it was her normal."
Right.
So it never occurred to her to say, well, everything's walking off the page, because she figured that's the way that's what happens for everybody, because that's the way it always had been for her.
Right.
So
how can it, not to get too sidetracked from this idea,
right.
But if I'm trying to think like usefulness and practical applicability, so I'm thinking 4th grade teacher who's got 35 kids in her class who has a third of them who have this or similar struggling to read issues.
Right.
How does she begin to introduce these ideas to the class and to the parents? And then how does somebody like in that type of situation begin to go like, here's, feel empowered to, bring it to their administrators, which they probably the last thing they would do, but bring it to their parents. Who can then look for clinics. Do they find vestibular clinics?
What you find is vision clinics.
Vision clinics?
But they don't always address the vestibular issues.
Okay, so these are specific. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you've got 2 different vision issues. That you've got the tracking, then you have what's called binocularity, and that's the looking from close to far. And your eyes are adjusting. Again, it's a low muscle tone issue. It takes the eyes much longer to adjust every time you look up. So if you're taking notes and you're trying to keep up and you look up and it takes you longer to get focus on the upper, it's going to take you much longer to make notes, to watch something like this.
That binocular thing was a big, I remember college, and I remember going like, I can't, like it doesn't work the way I'm used to. My eyes aren't adjusting as fast as I'm used to them adjusting.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a low muscle tone issue.
Oh, come on.
Which is which is underpinned by, so that's the vestibular, the muscle tone, right? Okay. Now you have the visual tracking piece, and the binocularity are above that. So.
But if I have a vestibular issue, the binocularity is going to be out of whack. If it's not out of whack?
If you have a vestibular issue, then there's a chance that you may have this to some degree. Maybe it's not as impacting as much, but if I have visual issues like visual tracking and binocularity, then my first go-to is we're going to start working on your vestibular system.
That makes sense.
Because that underpins everything. Foundational. It underpins the audio processing. Because again, it's that low muscle tone in the inner ear, right? So we need to pump up the vestibular system and support that better so that you can strengthen everything else that goes above it.
Yeah.
And you get to beyond the vestibular, beyond the proprioception, kinesthesia, which is that sense of muscle memory. So I ask you, if you do a sport, if you dance.
I almost asked you, like, if I hit a forehand with tennis, is that what you're talking about?
That's muscle memory, right? That's why we practice, you practice that swing. You practice that dance step. So that you don't even have to think about it anymore, right? That starts to become more second nature because it's in the memory of the muscle itself.
Right.
So, and then you go up to things like differentiation, being able to isolate the movement, the differentiation when we talked about the kids that have to use their tongues so that they can write. Well, differentiation is being able to isolate different parts of the body different actions so that I can do one thing. I don't have to do 4 things to make one thing happen.
Mm-hmm.
Lateralization. Am I working out of the right brain or the left brain? So, and then interhemispheric integration, which is being able to go use both sides of the brain at the same time.
How many adults can do that?
Well, we all strive to do that to a certain degree,
Uh-huh.
right? If these things down here are hard,
Uh-huh.
then these things up here are harder.
Because of the conversation we had about bandwidth.
About bandwidth,
Right.
about compensations,
Right.
about trying to, if we can take care of some of these things down here,
Right.
then all of this stuff up here gets easier.
Right.
And the differentiation, the lateralization, the interhemispheric integration,
Uh-huh.
that's where you get your organizational skills,
Uh-huh.
your ability to follow a sequence,
Uh-huh.
your ability to write, read, do math, all those upper functions that we want kids and we want to be able to do well,
Mm-hmm.
those all are up here. These pieces down here need to be working well so that these things up here become easier and can be done.
Have the bandwidth to function.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. So if you do the reflexes
Right.
so that everything is working the way it was designed to, and you don't have to worry about this stuff interfering, then you can go to this stuff, and then you can get to up here,
Mm-hmm.
which is, when all of this down here is being taken care of and is
Mhm.
working easier,
Mm-hmm.
then you can go to the tutor, then you can go to the teacher,
Mm-hmm.
then you can then those things become more productive because you have the ability to concentrate on this stuff and to work with this stuff. And that's when your tutors are going to be more effective, when your teachers are going to be more effective, because you now have the ability to sit still, concentrate, organize your thoughts, and follow a sequence. And you can do this work.
What else? What in the world is not those things? I mean, from factory
that's
workers
just, yeah.
to people in college to people working any kind of a job, from, like I said, factory worker up to like a
CEO.
like a CEO to
Yeah.
any kind of specialist in any kind of profession. They all have to be able to do those basic foundational
You have
things.
to be able to
And if
organize
you can't
yourself to
do
sequence.
those
to,
basic
yeah.
things, then how are you even going to get to those other things that are the higher level, higher order
You
level
don't.
stuff? You don't.
You don't.
And so that's just becomes who you are.
Yeah.
And that's just who I am. So like you just like, what does life become? And
That's the kids with ADHD
yeah.
who were called a handful,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Just a handful
Mhm.
who become adults who they end up job hopping because they can handle it for 3
months.
3 months, 3 years.
3 years.
And at a certain point they hit that place where it's great, it's wonderful, it's working,
Uh-huh.
and then they hit that spot where they can't overcome those. They can't pick up the sequence they need to pick up. They can't become as organized as they need to be because the boss wants you to have that paperwork organized.
Right.
Well, if you can't really read that well, and your organizational skills are challenged, you're only going to be, it doesn't matter how great a salesman you are,
Mm-hmm.
if you can't fill out the paperwork and you can't keep the organization going, you hit a spot where you're not going to be as successful.
So we just leapfrogged, and I think this is a really good time to do that, but we went up to like executive functioning skills.
Yeah.
I know that executive functioning skill, we haven't talked much about that. I don't know how much work you do with executive functioning skills outside of primitive reflexes and so reflexes and
The sensory processing.
sensory processing. So
Right.
we've got a couple of issues that we're dealing with. Primitive reflexes,
Right.
sensory processing issues, and then we've got executive functioning skills. And executive functioning skills is this whole other ball of wax, which
Right.
kind of boils down into, I've got this task to do, and I need to be able to organize my thoughts to get this linear sequence of events done
Right.
in a reasonable amount of time and a minimal cognitive load.
Right.
So can we talk about? I don't know how much you like.
Well, I work with what's called interhemispheric integration.
Okay.
So that's
That's that top level stuff that we talked
That's
about
that
before.
top level stuff.
Okay, what is that?
So that's getting both sides of the brain to talk to one another and work well together.
Okay.
You have to have the differentiation, being able to isolate things, and then you have to have the lateralization. I'm accessing the left side, I'm accessing the right side. We all have a dominant, right? So you've got your right side, or you're left-handed or right-handed.
Sure.
That's your dominant side.
Mm-hmm.
For people who have what's called cross dominance, so
Ambidextrous?
not ambidextrous, but for me, I've got cross dominance. So I write with my left hand, I cut with my right hand.
Okay.
I use my computer, I will type with my left hand, but if I'm a mouse, I'm using my right hand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even realize this was something that I did
Mm-hmm.
until I started studying these things.
Mm-hmm.
And it will happen that if I do a new activity,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think about which hand is or what side is going to do it. I just start doing it,
Mm-hmm.
and one side or the other will just kind of
Do it.
take over.
Sure.
Now, I studied dance for many years, and for a while I thought I was dyslexic because I would have trouble going, okay, a little combination, left or right, wait, what foot am I, no wait, for me, it was, your brain takes longer to make that choice because my brain is going, am I doing it with the left or my right? Are we having this conversation, left or right? I could do it either way. Well, no, let's go there, but everybody else is doing it this way. That's the way to go, right? Where other people are just doing it
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have to make that choice. Their brain doesn't have to make that decision about what side it's going to use. It just does it because that side, it's dominant. That's what works. There's really no, there's no choice made in being cross-dominant. It's just the way I've always been.
Sure.
Back to that.
That's the way I've
just
always
me,
been.
right?
Right. That's just who I am.
But it goes into that it hits the inner hemispheric part of things when you're taking longer to make a choice. That brain lag,
Mm-hmm.
right? That the brain is going, yeah, oh, no, yeah, okay. We have a choice here. Most people don't have a choice. So
And they just do?
They just do. So they just use that right side because they're totally right-handed, right? So everything is done with your right hand. If you're kind of ambidextrous, is probably the most well-known term, but when you're trying to make a choice of which side you're going to use, then that takes longer to process.
And this takes...
And that takes time.
And bandwidth.
And bandwidth.
And cognitive load. And
Right.
is more exhausting for the brain. And then, so I'm just trying to draw conclusions that bring it all, that tie it all
So
together.
it's going to take me more time
Mm-hmm.
to do some. If I'm constantly trying to make that choice, it's going to take me a little longer. So if I'm in a timed test, then I am not going to hit that time, or it's going to take me a lot more effort to concentrate to make that time up, and then I'm going to be more fatigued afterwards. It's going to take me a lot of times with a lot of these things. It's not that people can't do them. People are doing these things all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but it's taking them 4 times, 5 times more effort
Mm-hmm.
to do these tasks or
Right.
to do these functions
Right.
because they have to make more
Compensate for
choices,
their-
compensate for these slowdowns, compensate for these little glitches in their processing. And so, people, it's not that people aren't fully functioning, successful people.
Mm-hmm.
They are.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of energy and effort that they are putting into making these things happen is probably 4 or 5 times more than it is for other people. It's one of the reasons Janet got into this work,
Mm-hmm.
because she was like, why does this take me so much effort?
It's how I got into this work too.
Right.
Yeah.
And
For
so
sure.
and one of the reasons I got into this work was so many of the kids and people that I keep coming across had these issues. And it's
Mhm.
like, what is this? Why is, what can I do to help?
Mm-hmm.
And I work as a nanny for a family with 3 kids that have a combination of all these issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go to therapists and they'd go, these kids are really hard. Do you understand? It was like, yeah. And you're really good with them. I was like, well, thank you. But they needed more. And Jan came in at one point and did an assessment for them. Mm-hmm. And we started doing the work at their house. Mm-hmm. And we went back to one of the therapists who had 3 weeks earlier said, I don't know what to do with them. We've plateaued. I just don't know what to do. And she looked at me and said, what did you do? This is a totally different child. What did you do?
And in how many sessions over what kind of time period? Because it'd be really useful for viewers to have an idea of like, my kid's got this problem, or my husband or my spouse has this problem, and
what do you do? What does this look like? So
because Western medicine says we're great at these things, but we have no idea what you're talking about. Therefore, you must be faking it. Right. Get back to work.
So what happens is we did, and what you'll do with me if you come to see me is there will be an hour and a half long assessment where we look for the sensory processing issues, or we look for the reflex issues. And then I put together a home program that takes about 15 to 20 minutes to do. And it is broken up into small pieces because there are things that we are looking for that we call state changes. So if you see some of these state changes, then you have to stop. The brain isn't like a muscle. 4 more is not going to get you any benefit. 4 more is going to make you throw up.
Right.
But you break those out during the course of, a day, and you do them. Maybe the sensory processing issues can be done in 5 days a week. The reflex issues are usually done. Activities are done maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And then you take that program home and you do that for about 5 to 6 weeks at home. And then you come back to me and we take a look and we do
reflexes are
we run through everything and see
or
which ones are how they're responding. Are they making progress? Do we need to tweak the activities? Maybe there's an activity you don't like, or for some people, they'll get to a point where something is really bothering them. They really just don't want to do that activity. So we will switch that out for something that doesn't irritate them quite as much. And then I send you home for another 5 to 6 weeks. And that's what we did with the kids I took care of. We started doing that small home program. And
how old are these kids?
Now they are 10 and 15.
They're
a set of twin boys.
At 10 or 10?
A twin. Okay. They're 10 and
how old were they when you started working with them?
5 months old.
Oh, they were babies.
When I started. And we started doing the reflex and the handle work with them when they were about 4 and a half. And that's made a huge difference. And at that point, it was like, okay, everybody was saying, you need to do this work now. You just need to do this work.
So symptomatically...
And that's how I got into it. I came from a dance background.
Sure. That's movement. That's body integration. That's all that stuff.
I came from a dance background. I came from a Montessori background.
Right.
I'm a mother and a grandmother. And it's kind of taken... All of this has kind of taken all of the things that I have done throughout my life and kind of put it in one package. It's taken the child development piece, the movement piece, and put it into one place.
That's hugely beneficial for all people. We have reached our time threshold. I've got 100 more questions for you.
I've got more time. I'll come back.
So
I will come back.
Thank you so much for tuning in. And
sorry about the phone.
It is what it is. We have our time constraints, and there is plenty more conversation to have. Wendy, thank you so much for joining me on this conversation today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Senseenabled.com is her website. Sense-enabled, 2 words. No.
Sense enabled. They are put together for .com. And I do half an hour free consultations if people are interested. And I am happy to meet people where they're at. We are non-judgmental. We are holistic. We are about gentle enhancement. And behavior, posture, movement is all communication to me. So that's where I'm from.
And this is non-invasive.
Non-invasive.
Work that works for 3-year-olds, 30-year-olds, and
It-
300-year-olds if
yeah.
you live that long.
It goes from it works for adults, it works for children.
Uh-huh.
It's all about slow, subtle, holistic improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Getting the brain and the body connections to start working together.
Here's a great example that's related to exactly what we're doing. That alarm on your phone, if that startled you, this might be a conversation to have. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
Wendy, oh my God, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's been fun. I appreciate it.
Awesome.